something went wrong. Refresh the page and try again if the problem persists.
It shows me recording, so
yeah, it says that we're both recording. So then that's really what's important.
Okay.
So there's some hiccup with the streaming, but whatever. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I usually just launch into a quick intro on the show. And your last name is Gilliland?
Gilliland. You can just say Delaney. You don't have to say the whole thing. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's Gilliland. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. Hey, folks. Welcome back to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week, I'm your host, Charles Max Wood, and we are talking to Delaney Gilliland. We're going to be talking about how everybody's doing the front end wrong and how it's super slow because we all do it wrong. So do you want to introduce yourself and then we can dive in and talk about how we could do it better?
Sure. Yeah. As you said, my name's Delaney. I have a kind of a weird background. I've done a lot of stuff in game development, military applications, and all that. And I've always found that the web is an amazing sandbox for doing security and deployment and stuff. It's almost its own little OS. And I love the ideas of it and have done some pretty big applications in it. But I've always had this weird itch that things are being done wrong. I really had issues with SPAs and how you're basically sitting down all your state in JSON and then recreating the world each time you do an update. And so I started getting into hypermedia and the HTMX stuff, but I ran into issues with that too. And long story short, I ended up with my own framework called Datastar that is trying to solve all those things of being there's the line of like the MPA style of HTMX, and then there's the SPAs. And I think we really are on a different plane. We're doing stuff that's not in between. We're doing both and more. So happy to talk about it.
Yeah, makes sense. My weapon of choice in this space is Turbo, which is part of Hotwire. And it does a lot. It doesn't do exactly what HTMX does, but the same kind of idea where you're streaming data, back and forth, and you only re-render what you got back, and it sends back HTML instead of JSON, and so it doesn't have to go and figure out what all of your components are and then redraw it like React does.
Well, if you've used Turbo, then I've already worked with Mikhail and the guys over at the Turbo team to work on a new version of the Morph stuff. So we actually use yeah, we have our own version that we started from working with Mikhail. In fact, he was on our podcast a while ago, and we worked on that for quite a while. But we have the fastest morphing strategy in the world. So if you've already used Turbo, you've already are getting some of the benefits of the work that has been done in Datastar, ironically. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a story here, right? Where you're saying, hey, I wanted to do a thing and the tools out there were not the best tools for it, or I thought there could be better tools for it. Do you kind of want to just back up and give us some context on where this all came from?
Yeah. So I was working on a project and it ended up being in Vue and mostly 3D. So the project was basically a military thing where we sent every radar blip from every radar station in the continental United States in real time to the browser, and they wanted to be able to scrub back in time over an hour, live. So you're talking about 1 million updates per second, about 900,000 updates per second, and being able to scrub to any point in time within a second to any point in time. So that's a hard problem. If you don't know, that's a lot of buffers and a lot of GL stuff. And so I'm mostly a web guy. My background's in 3D. So I was knocking that out, and I was like, man, there's got to be a better way, because I'm basically sending with SPAs, you're sending the entire state of your application to the front end. All your state lives there, and then you're trying to keep those the state of the back end and the front end in sync.
Right.
Long story short, I started searching around more to do different things. HTMX I thought was a really interesting idea in that it's going back to kind of hypermedia of the 2000s. But one of the things I ran into is that A, it wasn't fast enough, and B, it didn't include things like the morphing out of the box. So I was like, well, why isn't that included? And then I was like, well, I want to be able to pick and choose, because some of the choices they made, I didn't think were very good. So I wanted to have a plugin system. They have extensions, which means you can add stuff on top of HTMX. But you can't replace anything in HTMX, right? It's just one big 5K file, and you're kind of left with it. So I went through and said, okay, if I was writing a game engine, but for the web, what would that look like? Everything being module, everything being kind of an ECS style, like a different way of looking at it from a data-oriented perspective. And so once I started getting into it, over time, it basically morphed into its own thing. But in Datastar, for example, everything is a plugin, literally everything. And one of the major plugins that we have is this thing that does server-side events. And people really have not understood server-side events. And they think it has to be a stream. It has to be this extra cost thing. All it is a chunked response. And that's it. That's literally all it is. It's a data type, which means as soon as you can send down a response with a data event, you can send down signals, you can send down elements, you can send down different parts of the page. So things like HTMX, it's a kind of it's not the norm to say, I'm going to update this part of the page or this part of the page, or I want to append this signal, I want to merge this thing. Like you kind of do a whole, just the way it works doesn't kind of jive with what I wanted to do. So I basically just sat down and started writing out these pieces, and lo and behold, ended up being way smaller. And so, for example, we include the fastest signal library in the world. It's built off alien signals, if you're into that space at all. And we have the fastest morphing library by far, and we're 10 kilobytes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the whole thing. And so it's a pretty crazy thing that we basically just, if you don't rely on other people's library, like there's no NPM, there's no vendoring. It's just all written for those specific needs. So every plugin is completely independent. And it makes it so that it's really fast, really small, and really tight code. And then you don't have to think about it anymore, which is kind of a neat thing. And also, we're the only one that's really relying on the specs. So there's a thing that's built into the HTML spec called data-star, which basically allows you to put data attributes. So data-star is just hooking into that and reading up the key value store that it gives you, and then implementing its own modifications and stuff. So basically everything is like data-class, data-on, data-load, these kinds of things. So we're living within the spec. So it's not that we're trying to replace it with a whole new SPA framework or something like that. We're literally just using the things that are already built into the browser, which means that we're very small and very fast. Because the fastest thing you can do in JavaScript is not do JavaScript.
True. So I guess, seeing this particular use case, where you've got millions of, blips on radars across the US and, kind of doing a lot of that real-time stuff, which I think is a different thing. You probably handle a lot of that on the back end, but then making it all show up the way that you need it to on the front end is the challenge we're talking about. Is this something that you would recommend just for people who are doing that kind of a thing, or is this a better fit for other problems as well?
Yeah, so I think that the way that Datastar builds things now is the best way to build websites, bar none. And the reason why is people say, well, yeah, I'm not building a game, I'm not building real-time stuff. Yeah, but if it can handle that, then it can handle your other issues so much easier. So for example, there's one of our users made it's really a rendering demo, because it's the dumbest way to build this kind of thing. But he took the Game of Life and he made every cell a div.
Right.
And then colored the div with CSS. And then when you click on it, it updates the div. So you have 2,500 divs. He's updating it at like between 5 and 10 frames a second. And it's a shared state. So everyone in the world sees the exact same version of it at all times. Right. And it's rendering in like 8 milliseconds. So if you can handle 2,500 divs, yeah. So it's fast enough that it is just a non-issue for what you're doing. And the other thing that's interesting about this approach, which we can get into, is that he's not sitting down new, like if you were doing that in a normal SPA, you would be sitting down JSON all the time.
Right.
He's sitting down the finished HTML, but the thing is, like, for example, in a Game of Life, it's not that different from the last approach. So he's getting between 400 and 500 to 1 compression ratios with no extra effort. So he ended up being on the top of Hacker News on a $5 or $10 machine, and it ran fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because essentially what you're doing is you're saying, instead of here's the whole Game of Life board in visible space, you can just say, hey, these handful of ones are the ones that got updated, right? Changed.
Well, so here's the thing that's really nice is that he's sitting down, in that case, all 2,500 divs, because it's a 50 by 50 grid. He's sitting all of them down every single time.
Oh, really?
But so the thing is, you just think about it as this big fat morph, and it is smart enough to say, hey, I already had a compression window that had bits and pieces of it. So you mentally can think
That's
of it
what
as
the Morph DOM does. Yeah.
that's what the Morph DOM and also the Brotli compression and all these things. Like we've thought about this stuff at a deep level where we can send down things. So if you had a board that, you know how in Game of Life, if it's just sitting there, it kind of switches between two states, like if it gets to a stable state, that changeover, since it's already in the window of the Brotli stuff, is like 12 bytes. 12 bytes. So sending down 2,500 thing is just a 12 byte change. So depending on how much data that is shared in your updates, you can get these crazy compression ratios. Like we've seen up to 4,000 to 1 compression. So it's better than WebSockets because you get all this compression stuff and you get the proper headers and cookies and all that stuff. It's better than standard CRUD stuff because you're halving your polling. So instead of requesting something and getting back and requesting something and getting it back, we're having that RTT because we can just send down as we decide on the back end when you need it. So you can send it every second or speed it up or slow it down. It does not matter. Everything else works the same. So it is by far the best way to build any website. And I will take on anyone with that challenge.
So let me kind of back up a little bit because I know that a lot of people, you know, if they're doing front end. So, and to give you a little bit of a context, I mean, my weapon of choice, again, like I said, is the Hotwire stack. So I'm usually using something like Stimulus. And so, and it, you know, you're talking about the data attributes and stuff, and Stimulus just basically gives you a convention on top of that to, you know, to scope your changes, and to track your events. So I guess what I'm wondering here is, you know, you've talked about a Game of Life, you've talked about, so those are both kind of visual things. I mean, I guess the one is kind of a poor man's, you know, pixelated thing, and then the other one is like a full on, what is it? The, you know, just a graphical visualization of the radar and things. So is there a data driven, you know, dashboard or user interface or admin panel or something like that that's been built with Datastar?
Yeah, the thing is, I work at Synadia on Nats as a day job, and so I'm building literally that right now as a real-time dashboard thing for all the interconnected sets of contexts on global superclusters. That's what I'm working on right now. So I can tell you, by far, it's the easiest way to do that because you can think of things in these large, fat, more basically think of it in immediate mode. If you've ever done game development, your UIs are generally, they're so interactive that it doesn't make sense to hold on to state because you're basically re-rendering the whole thing in a new state every frame anyway. So the immediate mode is more the style of Datastar, and it is by far the simplest way to build those kinds of complicated dashboards. If you go to the website Datastar or data-star.dev and go to, for example, the DBMon, like that's not in, like it is interactive, but we're actually updating that dashboardy thing in microseconds, not milliseconds, not seconds like you're used to seeing in a dashboard. We're doing it in microseconds. So we're able to make updates to the back end, make it very efficient, and actually make shared state. So one of the things I think is going to be coming in Web 4.0 kind of thing is much more collaboration. And the idea that all the state should be living in the right place, which is most primarily the back end, means that everyone can have these collaborative shared states. And it's actually cheaper because you're sending down just the parts that have changed. So it's way faster.
Right. So what does the approach look like then? So let's say that I'm like, all right, well, and I use Rails on the back end, but you know, so I'm going to use, I'm going to use Rails on the back end, or maybe I'll use Node or something. I don't know. But, you know, so I set all that up. You know, I have ways to get data from my back end, from my front end. So what does the workflow actually look like when I'm building this out?
Sure. So if you've already used Stimulus, or if you've already used the Turbo stuff, basically you could start with a skeleton page that just says, hey, here's my layout, and here's IDs for things I want to hook into, the same kind of way that Morph works. You do the same thing, except for now you're basically, all you do is when you send back these, we have SDKs to make it a little bit easier, but it's literally just a helper on top of SSE. You'd say, I want to patch element, and you give it an element with an ID. That's it. That's all you do. Everything else is handled for you. It knows where to grab it, what to update, how to morph. So the defaults are, if it has an ID, I'm going to select on that and grab that ID, and I'm going to morph by default. So in most cases, that's all you do. You just send a patch that says, here's the new stuff for that area that has an ID, and you're done. And the nice thing is that most of the state in the backend becomes really, really simple because you're just sending down when things change. So your locality of behavior, instead of saying, I'm trying to build up a JSON object to then send down, you're saying, I got something from the database, and what I do is I literally get the row from the database, and then I render on the next row. I get the data and I send it to the template library, and then I'm done. Like the locality behavior can be the same line.
Right. So you use a template library on the front end, or do you?
No, in the back end. That's because the thing is, it's up to your back end. I tend to use Go most of the time. It has a lot better tooling than C for web kind of stuff. And so I just have Temple, and I have Temple components, and you render the stuff and you send it down. That's it. Like it's very simple. We have SDKs in I think 12 languages to make this easier, so you can just get up and running quickly. But the nice part is, like Turbo and HTMX have the idea of like sending stuff in the back end. Like I think that's a good idea, a general thing. But the problem is they don't have the concept of signals and reactivity and things on the front end. So Datastar also includes things like data class, data style, data on click, all the signal libraries, data computed, data effect, like all the things you need to build front end stuff. It's done because there's times where there's client side state and there's times when there's not. And being able to know which is which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to talk through some of this, when you're talking about the front end state, right? You don't need a state library because you just put it all into the data attributes and you just update it as you go.
Yeah. So there's one
familiar to me with Stimulus.
So there's one basically global reactive store, kind of like you would see in Redux or any of these kinds of things, where you have a global store. As you make changes, it automatically updates and gives you signals and all this stuff. And then what happens is whenever you do actions inside of things, we have an @ sign for basically actions. So if you do an @get or an @post, it automatically compiles all the signals and sends them back up. There's filters on that you can say, I want to subset it and all that. But the point is that you basically can keep things in sync by sending that state back up to the server. And because you have so much of your states on the back end, there's very few signals on the front end, right? There's things like doing two-way binding to an input or a text area or to some kind of timer thing or some user local setting of a theme that you don't care about. Like there's some of that stuff, but most of the time you send all that up to the server and then you know the exact state of what the front end is doing.
Right. So then if I need to send a signal back from the back end, how do you manage that?
So with the nice thing is that we support all of it, again, in 10 kilobytes. So if you want to do a request against an HTML page, we'll morph that in. If you do it against a JSON object, we'll morph that in. If you do it against a JavaScript object, we'll execute that JavaScript for you. But in your SSE, you could be sending down, hey, I want to update this patch of this page, or I want to update these signals. So you have patch signals and patch elements. And then there's technically read signals when stuff comes in. That's the entire SDK. Like, that's it. So you just patch things in, whether they're signals or elements, and you update your page, and that's it. Like, it's fast because there's very little of it, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. On the other end, though, like if something changes on the back end, does it just push the data through a WebSocket, or how do you manage that? So
the thing that people have, this has been a big issue with the HTML5 spec. People are so used to seeing SSE, because that's I kind of think everyone should be using SSE for basically everything. And the reason why is because it's just a type, a response type. Like, you know how you get text
when you
HTML?
Say SSE, that's server side events?
Server sent events. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing about server sent events is, like, for example, if you went to the front page of datastar.dev, you'll see on the second little example, it's just a response type. So just like you have text HTML or application JS, there's another one called event or text/event stream. And all it is, you know how when you're sending a request, like if you're sending up a big file and it's a chunked, it's a chunked request. SSE is the same thing, except for it's a chunked response. So it's still just one request response, but you're basically leaving it open and saying, when there's a set of new lines, flush the buffer and send what I have so far. So you can, so it's just a standard fetch request. There's nothing special about it. There's no, like, that's the SDKs are to just help you set up the flusher and all that stuff, but there's nothing special about it. In fact, the irony is most of the time, most browsers are doing HTTP streaming already for you. You're just getting explicit control of that. So it's just an event type, and you're just saying new line, and then you're saying flush, like my response to the network. It's basically what's happening. That's it. There's nothing special. There's no WebSockets. There's no sticky sessions. None of that stuff. That all goes away. It's just a standard web request. So
that makes
it's
sense.
Easier.
So are you managing that on like a service worker or something, or?
No, it's just native in the browser. The thing about the service worker stuff that I found is that it can add a bunch of issues around having that extra thread can cause a bunch of issues with the UI and trying to get things back and forth. Like, all the benefits you're supposed to get from it, you don't. Like you just don't. And the thing is, we're so fast. Like if you go ahead and look at your net, like if you're running a Datastar website, like if you go to like, for example, DBMon, which is doing stuff in the microsecond, and you actually click your performance tab and look at our renders, they're such tiny slices that you're gonna laugh. Like it's just a non-issue for most anything that you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So at the end of the day, I'm just trying to visualize how this works. I mean, I kind of have it in my head, but I guess I'm wondering on the other end. So with something like React, you have React components and things like that. You don't need any of that. You just render all that on your back end and ship HTML.
I mean, the beauty is that you still have components, you still have things, but they're next to your database most of the time, right? Like you're just changing from your database directly to the thing you want to render. Like that's easier in every way. Like all the RSC stuff is a nightmare. All the Abravanel stuff around Tale of Two computers, all this stuff is completely misguided. And that's the thing. I think it's the fact that I don't consider myself a web dev at all. Like I just happen to use it as a tool, but I'm a lower level guy. Like I feel much more comfortable in GLSL shaders than I do in browsers. And I think it was just people have been going in the wrong direction for a long time. You have very smart people solving completely the wrong problem. And if you solve that problem, it can be very small and very efficient. The browsers are really fast, but the thing is, it's the C++ and the lower level stuff that's fast, not the JavaScript.
Right. So at the end of the day, if you do have a performance bottleneck with this, it's going to be on your back end and its ability to respond quickly.
Yeah, and I mean I've tested it out to like 40,000 connections on actively live in a Go backend. I think a lot of times the problem is JavaScript developers tend to try to have a full stack to try to keep, and I think it's not a bad thing. It's just that it's because they're trying to keep track of state. Whereas if they care about performance, pick a lower level language, pick something that's faster. Even Bun with the Zig stuff is a better choice than what most people do. Like that's where I want to see people go. And it's not like the JavaScript goes away. Like if you're doing a charting or some kind of 3D engine thing, you're still in our world, you're still writing web components. You still, you're actually embracing that. Whereas in the normal SPA world, web components don't make any sense. They just don't. Like I already have my state in my front end. Why do I need to share it with some other project? Like, why do I care? Whereas all of a sudden, if you're saying, I can make a Datastar application and it looks the same, whether it's in PHP and Go, Zig, it does not matter. Clojure, it doesn't matter. All that looks the same. Then web components, now you can have a shared library that every web developer is using with these web components that you're driving with Datastar. So it's props down, events up with web components. So you just drive it with Datastar. Now you're all on the same page. All your templates look the same with web components now. Whereas the current status quo, it doesn't make sense.
So I guess the other question that I have is, let's say that somebody adopts this. I'm a big fan of the idea of somebody being able to like build and keep track of all of this stuff on their own, right? It's like, hey, look, I mean, I work on a team. I think most people do, but on my own projects, right, I want something that I can just maintain myself, right, without having to build a team and face all of that complexity and keep track of what everybody's doing, right? Eventually I may have to get there, but the longer I can hold out, the better. So is this something that somebody can just slam in on their own and just go for it?
Yeah, so we're actually really good in brownfields because we're using the spec compliant stuff. We're not using special tags. We're not using special things. There's no build step. Like we are built in TypeScript because I love static analysis and I get as much of it I can. But the final thing is just a single CDN link, and it's one 10K JavaScript file. Like that's all you got to do to put it on a page. For most people, it's smaller than the fave icon that they use. Like so, you just drop that on your page and you can get to work. And the thing is, it's a spec compliant thing. So if you just say, I just want to use it for the data class. In fact, like a person that runs the podcast was actually using us instead of Alpine for their HTMX stuff, even though we completely replace it. Like it's one of those things of like, sure, you can. It's actually smaller than Alpine, and it does all the stuff Alpine does as well, and all the stuff that Turbo does, and all the stuff that Stimulus does. So like, yes, you could start dropping it in and then changing out things as you see fit. So there's real value in that, in my mind, is that it's meant for brownfield. And if you can start from fresh, then you're just going to be deleting code. Like that's the neat thing. I've done enough stuff in Alpine and HTMX, and I haven't done a lot of Turbo because I bounce off of it. If you're not a Ruby person, it's a little hard to use, in my opinion. And I will say, I guarantee you, like, I will take any bet that your code, you're gonna have less code on the page.
Okay.
Just because there's less that has to go on to solve the problem. And I think people just overcomplicated it because they kept working the wrong side of the problem, honestly.
Well, one thing that I've seen, just speaking to that as far as working the wrong side of the problem is that a lot of times we come from the context of the wider web world. And so we look at it and we say, okay, we have this solution. How do we make it better? Instead of saying we have this solution. Okay, we've banged on it. We've made it better. But if we had these underlying things different, then the whole solution changed and it got better. And so, yeah, I think a lot of this just kind of comes from the momentum of the web world. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned the plugins, and you've also mentioned like just pulling it in from a CDN and not using npm.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks, yeah, they have a build step on their front end, and so they pull in, and then they use something like Webpack or Vite
Or Vite, or Vite, yeah,
something, whatever. In the Rails world, we've kind of embraced import maps. And so I'm just curious. You're saying I don't do any of that stuff?
Don't need to. It's a non-issue. We have a version. We have started doing a pro thing, and we can talk about that in a bit. But I have a bundler built in, and because the web app is actually built in Go, I just use ESBuild as a library. So Vite and all that is using ESBuild under the hood. You know, it's a lot faster, not doing any JavaScript and just using Go directly. Like for me, it's just a library thing. So we actually have a bundler built into the page when you log in and stuff. So you can actually do all that stuff and make exactly the version you need. And it's just built into the browser, and it takes microseconds, and then I cache it and do all that kind of stuff. So we did, like, that's the right answer. You don't need all these other steps. Like there's a lot of times where people like bounce off of TypeScript, but I think it's one of those things of it depends on what you're doing. So for things like building an entire framework that's static analysis and is a plugin thing, it's great at that. If you're doing a small web component, you don't need it. Like, so people like they think that they need to have a one-stop solution for all these things, whereas most of the time, like what the library author needs to do versus what they need to do to get stuff on the screen is a very different problem. So
what I'm hearing is I pull this in, and it basically just works out of the box. I don't have to go write stimulus controllers or
nothing
components or anything like that to get functionality onto my page. If I need custom stuff, you mentioned plugins. Is that the way to do that? Or
so it's funny. At first, I made the plugins because I thought there'd be like a bizarre, like almost like the Unity asset store where everyone would write a million plugins. But what we found is there's not, like, the browsers are gotten good enough that there's not that many things that you need to kind of hijack and make better. Like setting up classes and having the string manipulation there, and for styles, and for like there's other things like data on RAF for doing request animation frame. There's certain things that are just easier in that expression language. But every time someone's said, hey, I want to make a plugin, we say, hey, like, talk to us, because if it's a good idea, we'll do it. So it ended up that I wanted it to be this thing that everyone uses. But the irony is there's not that many plugins to write. And if you come talk to us, we'll just write it in and build it into the library. In fact, it just happened because everyone tends to use styles or classes because of Tailwind and all that. But someone came in with some really good ideas around how to do animating of styling and stuff. And they wanted to use have a style thing. And we had it for 2 years. In a day, we had it, and we're like, oh no, that's a good idea. And now it's part of the latest RC is data-style is now just a built-in thing. So it's more of an it's more of an implementation detail at this point, the plugin system, because you have to know, like, it is a little bit harder to write plugins because we're very code golfy, and we try to make it as efficient as possible. So there's that, but anyone can write a plugin, but right now you basically fork and kind of go on your own route. But the whole system's there. You have access to everything. It's just getting it into the core. We're a little finicky with that stuff.
So effectively, because I know some people, they're just going to kind of have trouble wrapping their head around it. Okay, well, I have this custom behavior that I need to blah, 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 blah. And so it has to do all this stuff. And what you're telling me is that essentially the way that the framework works, you can do probably 99% of that stuff just with your data attributes, and then leaning on the framework.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you run into something really complex, like I built an entire 3D engine for one of the things that I'm doing, and that was just one web component. Like or a couple of web components, and they just nest inside of each other. And then you drive it with Datastar, and it's not that bad. And you just are updating props, and you're handling events. The thing is that browsers already have a native way to do that, a way to encapsulate JavaScript. So a lot of people are just like, well, how do I just add this one little JS thing? Most of the time, they're trying to interact with some other charting library or some other thing that they didn't wrap that in a web component. Then now you have something that can be shared anywhere all the time. And that's the right way to do it in the modern web. Like that's just easier for everyone. And now you have something that's shareable. Whereas right now we don't have a lot of sharing going on between frameworks and stuff. Whereas with Datastar, we embrace the what the browser or what the web is already good at. And what's also nice is if you are using Svelte or React or Vue and you want to move towards that, all of those support web components out of the box. Like you can turn a Vue component into a web component. Same with Svelte. All these things. In fact, Svelte's a pretty good option if you want to live in that world and still do SPA stuff. You can turn those things into web components and now drive them with Datastar and be so much more efficient in how you do that.
Right. When you say web components, you're talking about like the spec that's out there.
Yeah, the native spec. Yeah. It's really good. Like there's some things that are kind of clunky about it, but like we're working on a thing we're calling Rocket right now, which is a way to make it so that it's kind of like our version of Lit, where you have your own little thing that automatically does the hookup of signals and does some niceties for you to make the code smaller. But just writing the spec, like writing spec compliant web components is not that hard. You get props down, you make changes, and then you render your HTML. That's it. Like it's not rocket science.
So just to kind of recap, because I'm just thinking through this, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds pretty awesome. Now I want to go play with it. And I want to go see, how I can kind of plug this into my Rails apps, because sometimes writing the stimulus controllers or, kind of getting some of the custom behavior is just like, it's not exactly what I want, or there's a little bit of ceremony around some of it, not a ton, but a little bit.
No, and there shouldn't be, especially in a language like Ruby, there should be basically no ceremony. In fact, we have a very vibrant Ruby community already built, and we have a Ruby SDK. I would highly recommend joining the Discord, joining the Ruby side and saying, hey, I talked to Delaney and like, I'm interested. What do I got to do? And You'll see that we have a lot going on already. Like it's already vibrant for being a small community. So.
Yeah, I guess what I'm interested in is just to see, how it stacks up, and how much of the stuff I wind up doing in a stimulus controller that I can just.
You probably can chuck almost all of it. And the nice thing is that we have a guide that's. Yeah, and we have a guide, and it's actually written with all the examples in different languages. So if you follow the guide, you can just go to the Ruby one and literally step through and say, does this match my needs? And again, it's not that like we don't make anything from this, but it's more of a like we want to see the web be a better place. In fact, we actually set up a nonprofit. We have a 501c3 that's already set up for it. So like we actually have a mission and a goal. There's not going to be some Vercel rug pull play some later. Like we literally did the nonprofit to make people understand we don't have stocks or anything like that. Like we're stewards of the project. We're trying to do the right things, and we want to see the web be better, because I want to get back to, I dog food this. I use it for work. It's not like this is my gig. I just want to make it better and like have more people involved so they can make it better with me. So,
So you mentioned Vercel, you've also got Netlify and a bunch of these other ones that, they'll host your front end. They'll host your back end too, depending on how it's put together.
Mm-hmm.
And so is this something that, I can just throw together and have out there? I guess if you're just pulling it off the CDN,
you just copy paste to local if you want. Like what I do is I use Go, so I use the embed stuff, so I can embed all my file system directly into my binary. So I just make it so that it loads, like copies in as part of my build step from the CDN stuff from JS Deliver. And then I have a binary version that works anywhere in the world. So I have a single binary that I can deploy with SCP and have it on a thing, no problem. So it's actually simpler in every way. You don't need DevOps to do most things. You need SCP and a system cuddle file, and that's it. Like that's all you need. So it's simpler. But it works in the big scale teams too. Like it's,
It sounds like you can just serve it, depending on what your back end is and how that stuff works. You can just, you can run it through whatever asset pipeline or management you have. And you just serve it up and run it.
Well, that's the thing that I wanted to get back to. Like, I remember when, in fact, it's funny, the more of this stuff I do, the more I'm like, man, jQuery was so close to being right. Like it had a lot of these ideas, but it got so monkey patched and so crazy because the problem is the data-star attributes weren't there. CSS nesting wasn't there. Like it was the best version of its time, but we were so close to something that was really valuable because you just like throw jQuery on the page, you make the changes you need, and then most of the stuff was in the back end. It's like, that's pretty close, but we kept saying, well, we want to do more and more in the browser. And part of that is at the time you had like, for example, Glassfish in the Java world where every request was its own thread. Right. And that was like, you couldn't wait on the server. It was like seconds of time between. Now you can have 40,000 connections per core on a normal like async server. Like the problem is things like HTMX to me are yearning for the style of the 2000s, but I want some of that style with all of the features of now. Like people don't realize that we've gotten a lot better, and I want to have that betterness. So yeah.
You and DHH.
Well, in fact, the very first version of Datastar, when I committed it, I was like, DHH will hate this because it's when it's doing his whole TypeScript sucks diatribe thing.
Yeah, but the ideas that you're talking about and the things that you're pulling in, and you know, the niceties of how we did things, you know, 15, 20 years ago, you know, where a lot of this stuff was a lot simpler. I mean, he does push back to that. I mean, that's a lot of the idea that he's
I wish he would give it
TypeScript, but that's a different thing.
Well, the thing is that most people are conflicting. I want to write my daily like updating of my page in TypeScript. Like, no, you don't need to do that if you don't need to write any, like in the Datastar way, you basically write no JavaScript most of the time. You don't need to. And when you do, it's little snippets of expressions, right? You're going back to almost the on-click days of like, you're just writing a little expression. And so that's a lot easier. I would love if he would try it out because I bet he seems to be very motivated by getting to good answers. And I actually think he might see it and say, this is better than Turbo. Like if he actually spent time with Datastar, he might actually, like, I think that it could be actually a possibility because Turbo is only focused on Ruby. It's kind of a piecemeal thing. It's not really their focus. It's just kind of like, oh, this is good enough. It's better than the other tools out there. Cool, we're done. Whereas Datastar went hard on hard problems, and we're faster, we're smaller, and we're better. And like, he seemed to be one of those people. So I would love for him to try it out. I just don't have the context to know. Like, I'm a nobody on, like, I'm just a guy in a hole kind of thing. So,
so the other thing I wanted to throw out there is a lot of folks use. I mean, you mentioned Tailwind, but on top of that, and I think Tailwind is offering one now. If you have Tailwind Plus or Pro or whatever they call it, I do have that. I just haven't used their library because I don't use React on the front end. But they have these component libraries, right? And so it's, you know, you've got your accordion drop downs, and you've got your menu stuff, and you've got your, you know, you've got your scrollers and all that stuff, right? And so what you're advocating, if I'm understanding correctly, is you put all that stuff into a web component, and you build the behavior, and then you make it do the thing that you want it to do.
So that's a great question. In that, like, okay, like how do you do stuff with it? Like, great, you got the base stuff. How do you do things? So one of the things now that Datastar is done, we're V1's out. Technically, we're in RC, so in case the SDK authors need to change something, but it's at V1. And so now that that's done, we can start building things on top of it. So it's not like Datastar, as we actually literally created Star Federation, which is a set of tools and things. Because I do want to make the web better now. Like, even though I'm not a web guy,
nerdy.
I know, it's great. It's actually Star Federation is the actual nonprofit name. It's the best, dumbest name. But the thing that's interesting, at least from my perspective, is now that we have this foundation, we can build some really interesting tools. One of the tools that I'm building right now is called Stellar, and I think it's a Tailwind killer. Like 100% will just murder Tailwind. And the reason why is because basically I'm taking a lot of the ideas from OpenProps, which I think is a really good thing because it's basically just a bunch of CSS variables that someone from the Google team, Adam Argyle, made, that basically you're doing stuff with standard CSS, because now nesting's there, all the functions and mixins are coming. Like, CSS has gotten a lot better, so just use variables to do a lot of things you were doing in Tailwind. So it's a mixture between Uno CSS, Tailwind, and OpenProps. And basically, what I'm doing is I'm building a live editor where you are making changes to all the kind of things that you would do in a Tailwind config. You actually have a live editor. It's actually going back to the server, and depending on what you've changed, automatically has caches of all the stuff, and then generates the styles and stuff on the fly. And then at the end, basically gives you a full set of variables and all the configs and all this. So you actually are able to play with it live in real time, even though it's going back to the server. Because we cache everything, we can actually make it really, really fast and say 304 has not been modified, all those kinds of things. And I'm making it, and it's going crazy fast. And you can basically point at this thing from anywhere. And now you have a full CDN version of Tailwind with no build, no setup, works in any backend. That's where I think the future is going to be, is getting this collaborative stuff that is shared. And you can't share stuff if all your state's in the front end. That's just like the local first thing to me, I think is a hot nightmare. Like it's just the wrong approach to the web. It's not that if you want to do that, go do native. Like there's nothing wrong with native. I'm like a game guy. Like I like C and C++. Like they're great at that, but the web is not that. The web is about sharing, collaboration, and only having the state of your page at that time. That's what the whole hypermedia thing was about. Like not APIs, not JSON. So
okay, I'm not sure if you completely answered the question though. So you do have these different components that have different behaviors, right? And so yeah, is your approach to that just to put them into web components, or
if you need to? Most of the time, most of your components actually live in your backend, because it's about what state I'm changing in my like if you're talking about a database like row and you're saying I'm updating something, all the state is right there. You shouldn't have to send down JSON. You can just send down HTML. And the irony too is that people don't realize this. HTML is much more efficient to create and send than JSON. And what I mean by that, from a technical standpoint, for anyone that doesn't know, is like with JSON, you're basically reflecting, for most languages, you're reflecting through and creating a tree structure. So you're making this tree structure, whereas with HTML, you're just having static pieces and you're basically filling islands. So you have these big, large buffers, and you're able to update things way faster. And if you're using the compression stuff we do, where you have like Brotli windows or zlib standard or Z standard windows, all that stuff is already in the buffers. So now you're getting really, really fast. You're getting between 200 to 2000 to 1 compression ratios, and it's not recursing a tree. So yeah, you're still making components, but you're making them mostly, the locality behavior becomes the same line in my world. So that makes a huge difference.
Right, that makes sense. And then as far as, I mean, some of them are just visual things, so you got like your drop down menus and things like that, so you put those in, and with those you're literally just adding and removing CSS classes. Yeah. And so you just put that into your events and your data attributes, and it just does the right thing.
Yeah. So when you have, like, for example, you do a data class and then you give the class is open, and then you hook that into a signal. Done. Like, and then if you toggle that, you can toggle it from the back end, you can toggle it from the front end, you can do all kinds of stuff. Like, it just simplifies that because you're just hooking into the signals properly. It makes this little expression and you're done. I mean, it's a lot of what Alpine was doing from the front end side, but it's way more efficient.
Alpine. I've seen that in there was another one too that anyway.
Yeah. But you don't need VDOM to do that stuff. And you don't need the way that Alpine is doing things. And you can actually be a lot smaller and a lot more efficient. So
that's true, because you're just directly poking the DOM.
Yep.
It's just DOM events.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's cool. Well, my calendar just told me that I have a meeting for my day job here in like 7 minutes. So if people want to go check out Datastar, you said it's data-star.dev.
Yep, that's the website. Go check it out.
And then you said there's a Discord channel as well, and I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, no, we have around 1,200 users right now, maybe a little bit more. So yeah, it's been growing.
On the website.
Yeah, you can join the Discord is like on the main page. Let us know if you have any questions. But yeah, it works in every language, and if you have questions, come holler at us. We're happy to help you. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, so we do have a segment at the end of the show. It's called Picks, and we just shout out about stuff we like. So I'm going to jump in and I'll do some picks, and then I'll let you do some picks. My first pick, I always do a board game. My wife and I, we went on a trip. We had our 20th anniversary in March, and we couldn't quite get out for the trip we wanted, and so we did it a week or so ago, right before the 4th of July. And one of the games that we've been playing, some friends got it for us. We watched their kids while they went to a board game convention, and they brought it back for us. And so we've been playing it. It's called Gloomhaven: Jaws of the Lion.
It's very good.
Yeah. So they were telling us they've played all 3 of them, I guess. There's Gloomhaven, there's Gloomhaven, Jaws,
and then Frosthaven.
It's a prequel, and then Frosthaven.
Yep.
And so yeah, so this is our first foray into the Gloomhaven world. I've played D&D before, but my wife really hadn't even done that. So we've been playing that, and we're about halfway through the fourth scenario. That's the only complaint I had about it, was that the scenario took longer than we had, and so we've kind of had to like move the whole table aside because we didn't want to take it down. But that said, it's been a lot of fun. So if you kind of like D&D, and you don't need a dungeon master, game master, it just kind of sets the scenarios up, and you follow the rules, and you fight the bad guys and complete the scenarios, and it is really fun, and
It is a fun game.
So
they actually have a Steam version, just so you know, that you can actually run as well. That's actually really solid. So you can get the Jaws of the Lion stuff on that version as well. I'm a board game nerd as well. The shelves are lined. So
yeah. One of my daughter's friends is way into board games, and so she and her friends were over here, and he wandered into our pantry where we have half the pantry full of board games, and he was just we have plenty, and I get together with my buddies and we play every week. So anyway, so that's a fun one. And then other picks, I just picked up some new microphones. I'm gonna grab the box. So these are the Rode, if you're watching the video, Wireless Pro. It has two receivers or two transmitters with the lapel mics and then a receiver, and they're awesome. So I'm gonna pick those as just gear. They're not cheap, but they're great. And I've been in a scenario where I've needed to do more than two people with these, and so I also have a mixer that I bought for $100 off Amazon, and that's been great. So really, really happy with that stuff. I don't know if I have any other picks, but if you've got some picks, Delaney,
sure. I'll do two quick ones. There's a book that I've read multiple times. It's one of the few books I've read multiple times, but it's actually being turned into a movie. So I'd highly recommend reading the book first, because I'm curious.
What it is.
Oh, do you?
I bet I know what it is.
Okay, let's go for it. Tell me.
Is it Project Hail Mary?
It sure is. It's a great book.
So excited for that.
I mean, I hope they get Rocky right. It's going to be a hard one, but it's a good team behind it, so I have high expectations. But it's a great book. And if you haven't read that, there's also another good one called Recursion that I just read. That was a solid pick. I don't know the author, but it's it's a big yellow front cover. It's an interesting book. So those would be the book choices. And when it comes to, if you did board games, I have to say that I've been kind of getting deep into the ARX world. I haven't done the whole campaign thing, but if you haven't heard of ARX yet, it is a challenging, interesting board game of trying to control the uncontrollable. It's a very interesting take on. It's technically, I guess people would call it a space game, but it's not really. It's not like Twilight Imperium or anything like that. It's a very interesting thing, especially with 4 players. So I would highly recommend looking at ARX.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
So Project Hail Mary, I think people are more familiar with The Martian.
Yeah.
Which was another book that he wrote. And so it's the same author. I will say that I liked Project Hail Mary better than The Martian. So
by far. Yeah. Easily.
It is a better book. So anyway, I'm super excited. The second I saw the trailer, I sent it to my wife, and she
there's a trailer? I haven't even seen the trailer yet. Oh, I haven't even looked at it yet. So
in it.
Yeah.
She watched it. She's like, so I'm like, you got to read the book first.
Well, in fact, the Recursion book was a recommendation from Andy Weir saying, hey, what are you reading that you think are interesting? And he recommended the Recursion one. And I was like, I read it, and I was like, it's actually a pretty solid book. It's a very interesting take. So highly recommend taking it. Now I have to go watch the trailer, apparently. So
I had just gotten off of a Terry Goodkind binge, doing all the Sword of Truth books. And so I wanted kind of a different pace. It's like, okay, I've kind of taken on a ton of this. Like, I read everything that Brandon Sanderson writes, but I can only do like 5 or 6 of his books. And it's like, okay, I got to cleanse the palate with something else.
Right.
So So that's what this was. You know, I saw the trailer, and then I just started listening to that one on Audible.
Yeah.
Since
It's
I
actually
need-
one of the few books that you really want to listen to it. It's a great as an Audible because they actually do the voices. I can't do it
Yeah.
without spoiling things. It's really good as an audiobook, I'll say.
Yeah, the vocals with Rocky in particular.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, good deal. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up so that I'm not late for my meeting. I'm
Okay.
already late for my meeting. But this was a ton of fun. Definitely something I want to go check out. If people want to follow you on the internet, where do they find you?
Datastar. I'm on Twitter as Delaney Gilliland. I know it's kind of hard to say, but if you look for Datastar, you'll find me. Really, don't be interested in me. There's nothing interesting going on there. But I will say, Datastar has an interesting community now. So come join.
All right, folks. Well, we'll wrap up, and until next time, max out. All right, hang on for a second while I stop it. Make sure.